Is it bad that I can picture John walking in with like a Ric Flair jacket, just soaking in all the glory of all of his greatness?
That is Deshaun Hendricks. I'm Josh Hennig. Across from me is Nick Costco here in the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. And yes, it is that time of day. John McMullen joins the show every day in the 4 o'clock hour to talk Eagles and NFL. John, can you confirm or deny Deshaun's accusations about your attire?
I can confirm. I have a little ramp. I walk down it. I do a little spin, and then I get ready to go on the air.
The great McMullen, I told you.
John, it's good to have you on the show as always, each and every day. Of course, you can follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen. John, obviously the middle of the week, it's an extra day away for the Eagles to get to the Raiders. So, obviously this time of the week, we're kind of still in that transition period. What's the mood been like around the NovaCare complex as the team transitions from, in many ways, a win that they were lucky to get the Eagles to a matchup with the Raiders that they can't overlook as well?
Well, a lot of it depends, obviously, on what happens Saturday. If the Packers are able to upset Minnesota, they can overlook it, and it's not that big of a deal. So it depends if they need the game, number one, and we won't really know that. I imagine the Eagles are going to have two plans, and they're going to prepare, obviously, during the week to win this football game, because that's the most likely scenario since the Packers are playing without Aaron Rodgers, and they're going to need the football game. But if something else happens, they'll have a backup plan that certainly involves resting certain players, and I don't think they're going to be all that concerned, to be honest, about getting the win. So that's number one. But from a perspective of the team as a whole, I think all eyes, in an interesting way, you would think they'd all be on the offense and Nick Foles, but it's the opposite. It's on the defense and what's been going on and sort of leaking on the back end. Think about this, guys, and this is late in the season, obviously. The Eagles went into that game ranked 13th in the NFL in pass defense. They came out ranked 22nd, and that's a large sample size this late in the season to move downward that much. That's how bad they were defending Eli Manning and a bunch of pedestrian receivers. So that's a concern, and I think from Doug Peterson's standpoint, he thinks the guys are a little tired and beat up after that 3-game road trip. And he mentioned he's doing a lot of walkthroughs this week. He's sort of pulling back on the reins to try to get these guys feeling more fresh.
John, see, that was the thing that we were talking about today, especially with the defense. I feel like it was human nature that you're coming off that West Coast swing. You got a team that's very, very bad at a 1 o'clock start. Human nature tends to let off the gas and kind of, take it lightly. But when it came down to then needing to stop, they came through.
They did, and you deserve credit for that. And Jim Schwartz said that. I mean, Jim Schwartz has always said that. He said ultimately his job description is, to make sure the opponent scores one less point than we do. That's all he's concerned with. He's not as concerned with the other numbers. And the Eagles, 2 straight weeks, have been able to come up with big plays defensively down the end. But you can also look at it, as you mentioned, the Giants are a really bad football team. They fired their head coach. They fired their general manager. They benched the quarterback. They brought him back. They don't have Odell Beckham. They don't have Brandon Marshall. It's Roger Lewis. It's Tavares King. And you're giving up gassing plays, and they had a chance to win that football game. Arguably, if the Eagles fans didn't turn that into a home game, and the Giants had the false start on the 4th down, that's a very manageable play. It becomes much less manageable 5 yards back. So that was way too small a margin of error for the Eagles against a team as bad as the New York Giants. That's just the reality of it.
John, talking in particular about Ronald Darby and the back and forth he's had with the fans and the media this week, Is this just a case of a guy not getting a lot of coverage when he was in Buffalo, and now with the microscope on him, especially after a game like that, he's just reacting? Or is this something that, the Eagles defense and him in particular are still not really focused going into a stretch run?
Well, I don't know if it has to do with focus. I think he had a bad game, and he didn't handle it well, as you mentioned on Twitter. You got to have a thicker skin. I mean, there's a reason Jalen Mills is a Pro Bowl alternate, and Ronald couldn't be in that conversation because he missed the 9 games. But the one thing Jim always talks about with Jalen Mills is he's got no memory. So when he makes a bad play, he forgets about it and he moves on. And obviously, it's sticking with Ronald Darby, and I don't. That's not a good trait to have for a cornerback. So when you talk about who's the best cornerback on this team, well, it should be the guy who runs 4.35 and has the 41-inch vertical leap, but it's the other guy because he's got the mentality of a really, really good corner. And we'll see if Ronald ever develops that.
John, switching over to the national aspect of the NFL now, looking at the playoff picture, especially in the NFC, the 6 teams that are in right now could all be formidable opponents, and you never know. I mean, any one of these teams could make a run and get to the Super Bowl. But do we expect these same 6 teams to stay in their spots, or at least maybe just have the same 6 teams in the next 2 weeks, or do you think a team like Seattle or even Detroit can sneak back in somehow in these last 2 weeks?
Well, no. I mean, there's dominoes first as far as seeding. I mean, the Vikings could be anywhere from 1 to 3. And the Panthers could jump up if they win out and the Vikings lose a game. They could get a bye. So there's a lot of things that can go different ways. And remember, Atlanta plays New Orleans and Carolina. So people have to win those games. They have to lose those games. So if it's Atlanta losing both, then sure, somebody can jump in and steal that spot. There's still a lot of dominoes that need to fall on the NFC side, both for seeding and that last spot or two. So, I mean, there's still a lot of important football to be played, even if the Eagles have done enough to where they might not have to play the last 2 games at all, depending on what happens in Green Bay.
Now, my other question was about the Minnesota Vikings, and they seem to be in kind of the same situation as the Eagles. Obviously, they're playing with the backup quarterback now, and they have to go on a run and ride their running game and defense and hope their backup quarterback can keep the consistency going. But, in your mind, how good are the Minnesota Vikings? I know that right now they're the 2 seed, and you just mentioned they could drop a couple spots in the seeding, or they could even somehow steal home field advantage. But, I mean, shouldn't the Vikings be the favorites to get to the Super Bowl or even win the Super Bowl? One of those top 2 teams, considering how well their defense has been playing, and of course Case Keenum playing out of his mind?
Yeah, I think a lot depends on how they finish. I think if they do finish and win out, and they should, because they're playing Green Bay on the road without Aaron Rodgers, maybe we're having a different conversation if he's there. And then they close at home with Chicago, which is a really bad team. So they should have at worst the number 2 seed. And at that point, you say to yourself, well, this is going to be a really difficult out because the one thing NFL coaches will always tell you travels. It doesn't matter where you play, is your defense. And they have one of the best 2 or 3 defenses in the NFL. There's no question about it. They have tremendous talent, and on top of it, they got a Jim Schwartz-like defensive mind running things, and Mike Zimmer, who's every bit as good as any other defensive coordinator in this league. He just happens to be the head coach. Now, the one concern, and you mentioned a backup quarterback in Case Keenum. He's no longer a backup. He's a starter there. He's top 5 in MVP conversation. Now, can he continue to play at that level? His history as an undrafted player, he's never played at this level before. I don't know. That's the great uncertainty around the Vikings. But to have a great offensive coordinator, Pat Shermer, who was here for years, who understands how to utilize Case Keenum, and he's got great receivers. So all of that kind of enters into it.
John McMullen on 97.3 ESPN.com, Eagles and NFL Insider. You can follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. John Everyday being brought to you by Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit Geno Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, online at genopinto.com. Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. John, sticking with the NFL big picture conversation, a couple of news items coming down the pike today. The Giants, as expected, interviewed Dave Gettleman for their GM job. Dave Gettleman used to work in the Giants organization. Is he the prohibitive favorite? And I'm asking that because, early in the process, there were a lot of rumors that they might go after one of the Patriots, front office type guys and try to do a package deal with, either McDaniels and Patricia coming in with a Patriots front office guy. If they bring in Gettleman, that kind of changes that conversation, does it not?
Yeah, and it depends how you want to do it. If you want to structure it as a traditional setup and have the general manager pick the coach, and you're comfortable with Gettleman, which is from early on, that's the name that was at the top of everyone's list, and the Giants certainly respect him. And people have to remember he built one heck of a roster in Carolina before things kind of went south there. So he's got significant personnel acumen. They're comfortable with him. But you're right. If you have your mind set on a particular guy as a coach, whether it's Josh McDaniels or somebody of that nature, well, then you have to do everything to get that coach. So a lot of it depends on how you want to set up your organization. Typically, the Giants have always done it the traditional way, and that means hire the general manager and let him do his job. If that's how they're going to continue, and I think that's how they are going to continue, that would lean towards hiring Gettleman and letting him pick the coach.
John, speaking of where Gettleman used to work, which was the Panthers, we spoke yesterday a little bit about Jerry Richardson selling the team. Well, today it comes out that Cam Newton, the word he used was disgruntled to learn that Jerry Richardson is selling the Panthers, which is a little ironic considering that Cam Newton, the guy who had already dealt with enough controversy in his life, in college and the NFL, maybe you think you want to get away from some more controversy in his life, and now he's not happy that the guy is selling a team. It seems a little bizarre.
Well, he feels comfortable with them in that, they've had a good relationship for many years, and Jerry's always stuck by him. So maybe from that standpoint, I think, Cam's had some unfair things hurled at him over the years, whether it's his, sort of body language during losses or when he sort of earlier this season when he snickered at a question from a female reporter, didn't handle it well. So he's been taken through the coals a number of times, perhaps unfairly. And he's had an owner stuck by him, and I think this is just reciprocal. I don't think it's all that weird at all. I think he probably thinks that Jerry's being forced to sell the team. And by the way, I'm not sure that's completely true. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's over 80 years old. He bought the team for I think $250 million. He can cash out for probably $3 billion. Maybe it's just time to go from his perspective, and he'll get over it. But it's he likes the guy, so he's going to defend him.
Yeah, well, if you're going to go, you might as well go on a very high financial note, right, John?
Yeah, it's not a bad return on one's investment if you had $250 million to buy the team in the first place.
Right, exactly. John McMullen joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. John, the Titans have had some struggles. They still have to win out to make the postseason. And interestingly enough, their head coach, Mike Mularkey, has said that the mood of the team is, quote, pretty dang good, which makes me chuckle because anytime a coach seems to overemphasize the team is doing okay, it makes you wonder if the team really is doing okay, considering some of the losses they have are pretty sloppy.
Yeah, that's one of those questions where I sort of shake my head at reporters that ask them because, what do you expect a guy to say? Well, no, we're reeling. We're not ready. We're completely checked out. I mean, what is the coach supposed to say other than what you do, and you put an optimistic spin?
Right. It's John. It's like when somebody says the surgery was successful. I've never heard of an unsuccessful surgery.
No, yeah, exactly. There's never, in the history of the world, there's never been an unsuccessful surgery. But you're right about, the thing about the Titans is they're inconsistent. They're inconsistent because they have a young quarterback who's still learning, and came from an offense in college that didn't ask him to do a lot of NFL things. And when it comes to progressions and changing protections and doing things at the line of scrimmage. So it was always going to be a steep learning curve for Marcus Mariota. He's got tremendous talent, but he's going to be inconsistent because he's still learning these things. And that's what happens from week to week with inconsistency. Some weeks the Titans are going to look like world beaters, and other weeks you're going to say, how could they lose this game to this team? And that's because the quarterback is still in that process.
Going to the dark side of the force, I mean the Patriots up in Foxborough. So this situation with Tom Brady's trainer, Alex Guerrero, seems to have a lot of different information floating around it. So if you could kind of just clear it up for the audience, who exactly is Alex Guerrero, and why was his access to the Patriots severely limited?
Well, he's sort of Tom Brady's personal fitness guru, but he's had a lot of issues in the past when it comes to legal ramifications and selling things and claiming, homeopathic remedies were doing certain things, and there's no proof to that, so you can't advertise it. Things of that nature. He's always been, because of Brady's obviously power with the Patriots and the fact that he is who he is. He's got an office in the building, and he's always been allowed to fly on the team planes and things of that nature and be on the sidelines. And that has been stripped. He can't travel with the team, can't be on the sidelines. Nobody knows completely why or what happened, but there's a lot of Patriots that have gone to him as well because of Tom Brady's advice, and the actual training staff and medical staff doesn't like it. So I think finally they kind of won out because of some of the things he was doing. But from Brady's perspective and from Bill Belichick's perspective, really, even if it's a sugar pill, if Tom Brady thinks it's working, let him think it's working. Because he's 40 years old and he's going to be the MVP again. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but you do have to let the actual training staff and medical staff do what they have to do, and that seems to be the crux of the issue.
He is John McMullen. He covers the Eagles in the NFL. You can check out all of his writing at 97.3 ESPN.com. John, appreciate your time today. And we will talk again. Well, I'll talk to you off the air tomorrow, but you'll be back with Mike and Pete tomorrow.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, thank you, guys.
Of course, John's appearance being brought to you by Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit Gino Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, online at GinoPinto.com. Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. And I'm saying it again because, so here's the thing. It is December 20th. For all of you procrastinators, and you know who you are, here's what you do. For the Eagles fan in your life, you buy Teron Davenport's book.
Yep.
For the ladies who like the wine in their life, you buy them Gino Pinto wine. You cover all your bases, and you got all of your information without having to change away from the sports station.
Okay.
I just saved Christmas for you guys.